Picture yourself standing at the base of a massive stone obelisk, its peak glinting high above you as the first light of dawn breaks across the horizon. That long, sharp shadow stretching toward you isn't just a trick of the light. It's actually one of humanity's oldest and most sophisticated scientific instruments, a silent timekeeper that once orchestrated the daily rhythms of entire civilizations. For thousands of years, these towering monuments have been misunderstood as mere symbols of power or artistic achievements, when in reality they served as precision astronomical tools that connected the earthly and the divine through the simple, elegant movement of shadows. Today, we're going to unravel the hidden science behind these ancient marvels and discover how they shaped everything from religious ceremonies to market schedules in ways that still echo in our modern world. What if I told you that the obelisk shadow was more than just a marker of time? It was a living, breathing part of daily ritual, a celestial clock that dictated when to pray, when to work, when to celebrate, and when to rest. These stone giants were carefully positioned and engineered with such remarkable accuracy that they could predict solstices, equinoxes, and even the flooding of the Nile, blending advanced mathematics with spiritual belief in a way that feels almost magical to our modern minds. The priests and scholars who interpreted these shadows weren't just timekeepers, they were the keepers of cosmic order, bridging the gap between humanity and the heavens using nothing but stone, sunlight, and shadow. Join me on a journey back through time as we explore how ancient cultures from Egypt to Rome harnessed the power of obelisk shadows to create societies synchronized with the universe itself. We'll uncover the engineering secrets behind these monumental structures, decode the rituals they powered, and reveal why their legacy continues to fascinate scientists and spiritual seekers alike. By the end of this exploration, you'll never look at these ancient monuments the same way again. You'll see them not as silent stones, but as vibrant, dynamic instruments that once pulsed with the very rhythm of human life under the sun. To truly grasp the genius of these ancient structures, we need to journey back over 4,500 years to the banks of the Nile, where the very first obelisks were being conceived. This was not a project born from simple vanity. It was an undertaking of profound spiritual and scientific ambition. Imagine teams of skilled artisans, their tools made of dolerite, a stone even harder than granite, patiently pounding away at a single, massive block of red granite quarried from a swan. The choice of material was itself a statement. Red granite was believed to be the physical embodiment of the sun's fiery power, a stone of eternity. The process was incredibly slow, taking months or even years to shape a single monument from the living rock. But the most dazzling feature was often reserved for the very top, a pyramidion, a miniature pyramid cap sheathed in a brilliant alloy of gold and silver called electrum. This wasn't just for show. This gleaming cap was designed to be the first part of the monument to catch the light of the rising sun, and the last to hold onto its rays at dusk, effectively making the entire obelisk a beacon that seemed to ignite with divine fire. While their imposing presence certainly communicated the pharaoh's absolute authority and connection to the gods, their function extended far beyond political propaganda. The ancient Egyptians saw the universe as an orderly, predictable place governed by cosmic laws, and the obelisk was a physical instrument designed to measure and interact with that order. Their slender, four-sided form, tapering perfectly to a point, was a masterstroke of intentional design. This specific shape was calculated to cast a clean, sharp, and easily readable shadow. A bulky or irregular shape would have created a blurred, distorted shadow useless for precise measurement. This precise geometry turned the obelisk into a giant gnomon, the central element of a sundial, allowing priest astronomers to track the sun's movement with an accuracy that would not be surpassed for millennia. They were strategically positioned within temple complexes to align with key celestial events. During the solstices, the longest and shortest days of the year, the shadows would fall along specific, pre-marked pathways. At the equinox, when day and night are of equal length, the shadow's behavior would be perfectly symmetrical. These alignments were not coincidental. They were the entire point, transforming the obelisk from a static monument into a dynamic, cosmic calendar. The sheer scale of these projects reveals a breathtaking command of engineering and logistics that is still humbling to consider today. We are talking about monoliths that frequently weighed between 200 and 400 tons, the equivalent of 250 family cars, being carved, transported, and erected with nothing but human muscle, rope, and wooden sledges. Moving a single obelisk from the quarries at Aswan to a temple in Thebes or Heliopolis was a national endeavor. It involved loading the colossal stone onto a specially built, massive barge during the Nile's annual flood, when water levels were highest, and then carefully navigating the river's currents. Upon arrival, the even more perilous task of erection began. Using a system of earthen ramps, levers, and counterweights, crews would painstakingly raise the stone into a vertical position. The margin for error was zero. A single mistake could shatter the obelisk or cost countless lives. The successful raising of an obelisk was celebrated as a triumph of both human will and divine favor, a testament to a society that could literally move mountains in service of their understanding of the cosmos. This seamless fusion of raw power, spiritual symbolism, and precise science is what made the obelisk so central to ancient Egyptian life. It stood as a permanent reminder that the pharaoh's rule was as immutable as the sun's journey across the sky, and that the god's blessings were as tangible as the shadow at one's feet. It bridged the gap between the earthly and the divine, making the abstract concepts of time and celestial order into something visible, measurable, and deeply integrated into the daily rituals of the people. It was both a symbol of a god's power and the very tool used to schedule the ceremonies in that god's honor. In the obelisk, we see the ancient Egyptian world, made stone, a perfect, harmonious union of belief and reason, of heaven and earth. Now, let's focus on the elegant geometry that made this all possible. Picture the obelisk not just as a stone pillar, but as the central pin in the world's largest and most sophisticated sundial. Its long, sharp shadow sweeping across the ground was the clock's hand, and the sun was the unwavering power source. This shadow didn't just move randomly. It followed a precise, predictable path dictated by the sun's journey across the sky. The ancient astronomers understood this celestial dance intimately. They knew that as the sun rose in the east, the shadow would stretch long to the west. As the sun climbed to its highest point at midday, the shadow would shrink to its shortest length, almost directly underneath the monument. Then, as the sun descended toward the western horizon, the shadow would gradually lengthen again, this time pointing east. This daily cycle was as reliable as the sunrise itself. To transform this moving shadow into a usable timepiece, the ground around the obelisk became a carefully calibrated clock face. Priests and surveyors would inscribe lines or place markers, sometimes simple stones, sometimes elaborate pavements at specific points. These markings did not represent minutes as we know them, but rather broader periods of the day crucial for organizing society. A shadow touching one marker might signal the hour for the morning market to open. Another mark could indicate the time for the principal daily offering to the sun god Ra. The shadow's arrival at a third point might tell laborers in the fields that it was time for their midday rest. This system created a public time standard that everyone, from the pharaoh to the farmer, could observe and follow, synchronizing the entire community's activities with the rhythm of the heavens. The effectiveness of this entire system hinged on two critical factors: the obelisk's exact height and its perfect placement. The taller the obelisk, the longer and more clearly defined its shadow would be, making its movements easier to track and measure with precision. Its location was even more vital. Builders went to incredible lengths to ensure these monuments were aligned with the cardinal directions: true north, south, east, and west. This precise orientation was the masterstroke. It meant the shadow's path was consistent and symmetrical, especially during the two equinoxes. On those 2 days each year, when day and night are of perfectly equal length, the sun rises due east and sets due west. The obelisk's shadow would follow a perfectly straight line from west to east, bisecting the surrounding space with geometric perfection. This event was not just a scientific curiosity, it was a powerful celestial signal. This precise alignment triggered some of the most important events in the ancient Egyptian calendar. When the equinox shadow fell along its designated line, it was a call to action. For farmers, it was a critical marker for the agricultural cycle, signaling the ideal time to prepare the fields for planting or to begin the harvest. For the priesthood, it was a moment of profound spiritual significance, initiating major religious festivals and ceremonies designed to maintain Maat, the divine order of the universe. The entire society, from its economic practices to its deepest spiritual beliefs, was woven into this cosmic schedule. The obelisk shadow was the thread that connected them all, embedding a sense of celestial order into the very fabric of their daily existence, proving that for them, science and spirituality were two sides of the same sun-drenched coin. But the obelisk's role extended far beyond marking the hours of a single day. These structures were, in essence, the ancient world's most magnificent cosmic calendars, engineered to capture the grand, year-long dance of the heavens. The most critical dates in their celestial schedule were the solstices. On the summer solstice, the sun reaches its highest possible point in the sky for that hemisphere, resulting in the shortest shadow an obelisk would cast all year. Conversely, the winter solstice sees the sun at its lowest arc, producing the year's longest, most dramatic shadow. Ancient architects didn't just notice these patterns, they designed entire sacred landscapes around them. An obelisk would be precisely positioned so that on these pivotal days, its shadow would fall directly upon a specific, often highly decorated, altar or a carved marker set into the temple floor. This wasn't an accident of placement, it was a meticulously calculated event. The moment the shadow connected with that stone was a moment of powerful divine communion. It was interpreted as the sun god Ra physically touching that sacred spot, and it would trigger elaborate ceremonies with chanting, offerings, and processions designed to honor the deity and ensure his continued journey across the sky. This transformed the obelisk from a simple timekeeper into a dynamic switch that could activate the most important religious rituals of the year. This astronomical precision was also applied to a star, proving the Egyptians' sophisticated understanding of the entire night sky. Just before dawn each year, around mid-July, the bright star Sirius would become visible again after a 70-day absence, hovering just above the horizon in the pre-dawn light. This event, known as the Helical rising, was of immense practical and spiritual importance because it heralded the imminent, life-giving flooding of the Nile River. The annual inundation was the foundation of Egyptian agriculture, depositing rich, fertile silt across the farmlands. Using their obelisks as fixed reference points, priest astronomers could track the position of Sirius relative to the monument's silhouette against the brightening morning sky. When the star appeared in a specific alignment with the obelisk's peak, it was the celestial signal that the floodwaters would soon arrive. This gave the entire civilization a crucial heads-up, allowing them to mobilize moving livestock, preparing irrigation channels, and readying the granaries. This ability to predict a natural event weeks in advance, using nothing but careful observation of the stars and a giant stone marker, was a staggering scientific achievement that directly ensured the survival and prosperity of their society. This deep, intentional connection between massive architecture and the movements of celestial bodies reveals a world view where the earthly and the cosmic were inseparable. The obelisk was the physical anchor point that grounded their understanding of the universe's order. Its alignment synchronized every facet of human activity, from when to plant crops and when to harvest, to when to crown a new pharaoh or begin a religious festival, with the immutable rhythms of nature. This created a society that lived in harmonious concert with its environment, believing wholeheartedly that the gods were communicating their will and their blessings through the sun's journey and the stars' positions. The ancient Egyptian cosmologists who designed these systems were geniuses, blending the roles of architect, astronomer, and priest into one. They left behind a legacy not of abstract theories, but of towering stone monuments that stand as eternal testament to humanity's enduring quest to find our place in the vast, orderly cosmos. The rhythm of daily life in ancient Egypt was orchestrated by the silent, steady sweep of the obelisk's shadow, a celestial metronome that governed everything from the most sacred rites to the most mundane tasks. Before the first sliver of sun peeked over the horizon, a designated priest would already be in position, his eyes fixed on the monument's peak. The moment the first thin sliver of shadow stretched across a specific marker on the ground, a powerful signal was given. This was not merely the start of another day, it was a moment of rebirth, a victory of light over the chaos of night. The priest would raise his hands, and a chorus of voices would erupt from the temple, chanting hymns to awaken the sun god Ra and welcome him back to the world. Offerings of bread, beer, and incense would be presented, their smoke rising to meet the dawn, a tangible connection between the earthly and the divine fueled by that first critical shadow. As the sun climbed higher, the obelisk's shadow would contract, shortening minute by minute. This shrinking dark line became the empire's official clock, synchronizing the activities of millions. In the bustling marketplaces, vendors would not open their stalls until the shadow had retreated to a specific line etched into the pavement, ensuring a fair and standardized start to commerce. In open-air courts, judges would convene sessions and pronounce judgments based on the shadow's position, their authority literally backed by the sun. For the laborers toiling on royal projects or in the fields, the shadow's journey across marked stones dictated their breaks and their end of day, a system that was both impartial and universally understood. There was no need for personal timepieces. The entire society operated under a single, public, and indisputable temporal framework. The obelisk did not tell time for individuals, it told time for the civilization. The sun's descent in the afternoon was marked by the shadow's gradual elongation, a slow, stretching signal that the day was winding down and the focus was shifting back to the spiritual. As the shadow reached another set of predetermined markers, it triggered a series of evening rituals. Purification ceremonies would begin, with priests and sometimes even members of the public performing ablutions to cleanse themselves from the toils of the day. Closing prayers were offered to thank the deities for their protection and to ask for safekeeping through the coming night. The final, long ray of the shadow touching a designated point was as decisive as a curtain falling, signaling the official end of the public day and the time to secure city gates and return home. Beyond the mundane cycle, the obelisk's shadow also announced moments of high celebration and state importance. special ground inscriptions, visible only to the priesthood, were placed to mark extraordinary occasions. When the tip of the shadow perfectly aligned with a unique hieroglyph or a carved cartouch on the king's birthday, it was a celestial affirmation of his divine right to rule, triggering public announcements, feasts, and the distribution of goods. During religious festivals dedicated to gods like Osiris or Hathor, a specific shadow alignment might signal the precise moment for a sacred procession to begin its journey from one temple to another, ensuring the ritual's timing was perfectly auspicious. This fusion of the practical and the profound is what made the obelisk so central to existence. It was a tool that seamlessly wove the threads of economics, law, labor, and spirituality into a single, cohesive tapestry of daily life, all guided by the silent, majestic dance of stone and sunlight. Mastering the science of the obelisk was no simple task. It demanded a lifetime of rigorous training and intellectual discipline. Young boys selected for the priesthood entered temple schools where their education was as demanding as that of any modern scientist. Their curriculum was built on a foundation of advanced mathematics, learning to calculate areas, volumes, and most crucially angles with astonishing precision. They studied geometry not as an abstract theory but as a practical tool for measuring the world, using ropes knotted at regular intervals to create perfect right angles and align structures with the cardinal directions. But their most important classroom was the sky itself. Night after night, they would memorize the pathways of stars, and day after day, they would chart the sun's shifting journey, learning to anticipate its movements with an intimacy we now reserve for close friends. This deep, ingrained knowledge transformed them into the living databases of their civilization, the only ones who could truly read the messages written in sunlight and shadow. Their daily work was one of meticulous observation and precise record-keeping. Imagine a priest, perhaps using a simple palm rib to inscribe hieratic script onto a flake of limestone or a sheet of papyrus. His notes would detail the exact length of the obelisk's shadow at noon, the point where its tip touched the ground at sunset, and any subtle anomalies in its path. These were not just daily logs, they were a centuries-long data set. By comparing his observations with those of his predecessors, stored in the temple's vast archives, he could detect patterns invisible to the untrained eye. He would notice that the sun's path was gradually changing over the years, a slow procession that required tiny adjustments to the ceremonial calendar. An unexpected shortening of the shadow on a certain day might signal an atmospheric phenomenon that could affect the harvest. This relentless dedication to data allowed them to refine their predictions year after year, turning celestial observation from a general practice into an exact science. Their ability to adjust rituals and agricultural schedules based on this accumulated knowledge was what kept the entire machine of the state running in harmony with the cosmos. This scientific prowess granted them an authority that was both spiritual and political, making them the ultimate intermediaries between the people and the pantheon of gods. Their most powerful demonstration of this was the prediction of eclipses. While they may not have understood the precise orbital mechanics we know today, their centuries of records allowed them to recognize the cyclical patterns of these terrifying events. When they announced that the sun would be consumed by the serpent Apep or the moon would turn to blood on a specific night, and it came to pass exactly as foretold, their power was absolute. To the population, this was not a feat of calculation. It was proof that the priests alone could negotiate with the forces of chaos and ensure the sun's victorious return. This reinforced a social contract where the people obeyed the Pharaoh, who was a god, and the Pharaoh, in turn, relied on the priests to interpret the will of the heavens. Their word on matters of divine timing was beyond question. To achieve this level of precision, they didn't rely on the obelisk alone. They employed a suite of sophisticated tools that augmented their observations. One of the most important was the merkit, an ingenious instrument that functioned like a primitive theodolite. It consisted of a horizontal bar with a plumb line hanging from it, used in pairs by two priests. By sighting along the bar toward a specific star, they could establish a true meridian line, a perfect north-south alignment, against which the obelisk's own orientation could be checked and verified. They used bay levels filled with water to ensure their platforms and sighting markers were perfectly horizontal. At night, they might use a simple notched palm branch to measure the altitude of stars as they crossed the meridian. These tools, though simple in construction, were profound in application. They allowed the priests to create a fixed, stable grid of reference points on the ground and in the sky, against which the moving shadow of the obelisk could be measured with incredible accuracy. The obelisk was the public clock face, but these smaller instruments were the delicate, hidden gears that made the entire system work. Ultimately, the role of these scholar priests extended far beyond the temple walls and into the very heart of statecraft, influencing the most critical decisions of the empire. The pharaoh did not go to war, commission a new temple, or even set his own coronation date without first consulting these masters of time. Their advice was considered essential for aligning human ambition with celestial favor. They would calculate the most auspicious moment for a military campaign to begin, ensuring the sun god's shadow would fall favorably upon the army's standard. Before the first stone of a pyramid was laid, they determined the perfect day for the foundation ceremony, one where the stars promised stability and eternity for the structure. They were the ultimate power behind the throne, a class of technocrats whose command of astronomy, mathematics, and engineering made them indispensable advisors. In a civilization that believed its prosperity and survival depended on maintaining harmony with the divine order, these keepers of the obelisk's secrets were the essential linchpins holding heaven and earth together. To truly grasp how these principles worked in practice, let's journey to two of ancient Egypt's most significant religious centers, starting with the breathtaking Karnak temple complex in Thebes. This wasn't just a single temple, it was a sprawling city of stone, a divine metropolis dedicated primarily to the god Amun-Ra. Walking through its great hypostyle hall, one would have been dwarfed by towering columns, but rising even higher were the obelisks, piercing the sky like stone rays of the sun. Among the most famous were those commissioned by the female pharaoh Hatshepsut. She had one of the tallest obelisks ever created erected here, a single block of red granite stretching nearly 100 feet into the air and weighing an estimated 320 tons. Its tip was originally sheathed in electrum, an alloy of gold and silver designed to blaze in the sunlight. This wasn't just a monument to her power, it was a functional part of the temple's daily rhythm. Priests used its sweeping shadow to time the most important rituals of the day. The moment its shadow touched a specific altar in the morning, it signaled the time to present the first offerings of food and incense to Amun-Ra, awakening the god. As the shadow retreated and then lengthened again, it guided the intricate schedule of hymns, processions, and purification ceremonies that maintained the cosmic order. For the surrounding agricultural communities, the obelisk's shadow also served a vital practical purpose. Its longest and shortest shadows at the solstices marked the critical turning points of the farming year, telling farmers when to prepare the fields after the Nile's flood receded and when to begin harvesting, directly linking their survival to the celestial clockwork. Just north of Thebes, in the city of Heliopolis, which literally means City of the Sun, the role of the obelisk was even more profound. This was the epicenter of the cult of the sun god, first known as Autumn and later as Ra. Here, the obelisks were not just tools but were considered to be physical embodiments of the sun's power, petrified beams of light connecting heaven and earth. The most famous obelisk from this city, often called Cleopatra's Needle, though it predates her by over 1,000 years, now stands on the Thames Embankment in London. But in its original home, it was the heart of a vast ceremonial complex. The entire layout of Heliopolis was an astronomical diagram, with temples, shrines, and processional avenues aligned to solar events. The obelisk's shadow was the central needle in this cosmic dial. Inscriptions that were carved into its base, though now faded by time and travel, detailed its function. They described how the shadow's path was used to determine the precise timing for the 5 daily offerings to Ra, ensuring that the god was nourished at the correct intervals to continue his journey across the sky. During major festivals like the celebration of the New Year, the shadow's alignment with specific points on the processional avenue dictated the exact route and timing for priests carrying the sacred bark of the god, ensuring the ritual's magic was performed at the most potent astrological moment. The physical evidence uncovered by archaeologists at these sites removes any doubt about their purpose. Around the bases of these obelisks, excavations have revealed carefully carved lines and markers etched into the stone pavements. Some are simple dashes, while others are more elaborate, inscribed with hieroglyphs denoting specific hours of the day or names of important festivals. These are not random scratches, they form a precise radial pattern, fanning out from the obelisk's base like spokes on a wheel. Researchers using modern surveying equipment have confirmed that these lines correspond perfectly to the shadow's position at the summer and winter solstices and the spring and autumn equinoxes. Other markers align with the shadow's tip at the zenith of major religious holidays. This proves that the open plazas around these monuments were not merely empty space. They were giant, publicly visible clock faces and calendars. A citizen in Karnak or a pilgrim in Heliopolis didn't need to ask a priest for the time. They could simply glance at the obelisk and see where its shadow fell, knowing it was time for the market to open, for court to be in session, or for a ceremony to begin. This democratization of time fostered a shared social rhythm, uniting everyone from the pharaoh to the potter under the same cosmic schedule. The seamless integration of the obelisk into the city's design shows that for the ancient Egyptians, science, religion, and daily life were not separate spheres but were woven together into a single, harmonious fabric, with the silent, sweeping shadow as the thread that bound them all. This entire sophisticated system of tracking shadows had a formal name, even in antiquity, though we know it today by its Greek term, mnemonics, the science of sundials and shadow-casting instruments. And at the very root of this science stands the obelisk, the original, monumental gnomon. The word gnomon itself simply means one who knows or indicator, and that is precisely what these stone giants were, the ultimate indicators of celestial knowledge. Every time an Egyptian priest observed the sharp, dark line stretching from the base of an obelisk, he was gathering a wealth of raw astronomical data. He wasn't just seeing a shadow, he was reading a complex measurement. The length of that shadow, combined with the known height of the obelisk, allowed him to calculate the sun's altitude, its angle above the horizon. The direction in which the shadow pointed at any given moment gave him the solar azimuth, its position along the horizon relative to due north. These two pieces of information, altitude and azimuth, are the fundamental coordinates for mapping the sun's position in the sky, and the ancient Egyptians were deriving them with nothing more than a stone pillar and a marked plaza. This observational data was the key that unlocked deeper understandings of their world, quite literally. By carefully recording the shortest shadow cast at noon throughout the year, they could identify the summer and winter solstices. But the true genius emerged when they compared these observations from different locations. Scholars stationed at outposts in Lower Egypt and further south in Upper Egypt would have noticed that the length of the noon shadow on the same day of the year differed between their two positions. This discrepancy wasn't random, it was a direct function of their different latitudes. The obelisk, in essence, became a tool for calculating their position on the curved surface of the Earth. While they may not have conceptualized a spherical planet in the way we do, their geometric calculations accurately reflected the reality of their curved world. Some researchers even suggest that by comparing these longitudinal records over vast distances, they might have deduced the astonishingly precise value of the Earth's axial tilt, that critical 23.5-degree angle that gives us our seasons. This means that thousands of years before the Greek astronomer Eratosthenes famously calculated the Earth's circumference, Egyptian scholars were using their obelisks to make profound geodetic measurements. The principles observed on this grand scale with obelisks were soon refined into more personal and portable devices, leading to one of the most beautiful innovations in timekeeping history, the hemicycle. Imagine taking the open plaza around an obelisk and curving it inward. A hemicycle was a concave, hemispherical sundial, often carved from stone. Instead of a towering monolith at its center, it used a smaller, horizontal gnomon that protruded from the center of the bowl's interior. The curved surface allowed for incredibly precise markings. The path of the shadow's tip across this concave space traced hyperbolic lines, which could be engraved to denote not only the hours of the day, but also the changing paths of the sun throughout the year, effectively combining a clock and a calendar into a single, elegant instrument. The hemicycle was a direct descendant of the open-air obelisk clock, a miniaturized and refined application of the same geometric principles first worked out on a monumental scale. The mathematics powering all of this was a form of proto-trigonometry, a practical geometry of triangles. The obelisk, its shadow, and the imaginary line from the top of the obelisk to the tip of the shadow formed a massive right-angled triangle. The Egyptians were masters of manipulating the ratios between these sides, a concept they embedded in their own unique system of measurement known as the sect. The sect was essentially a ratio that expressed the run over the rise, much like the modern trigonometric concept of cotangent. While they didn't have our tables of sine and cosine functions, they possessed all the necessary geometric understanding to achieve the same results. They could use proportional calculations to determine any element of the triangle if they knew the others. This mathematical framework was not abstract. It was applied constantly, from ensuring the correct slope of a pyramid to predicting exactly where an obelisk's shadow would fall at a future date for ritual planning. Their mathematics was a language for describing and interacting with the physical world, and the obelisk was one of its most eloquent speakers. This incredible foundation of knowledge, developed over centuries of observing obelisk shadows, did not disappear with the decline of the pharaohs. It became a cornerstone of classical science, traveling across the Mediterranean to inspire and inform Greek and later Roman scholars. The Greeks, with their love for abstract theory, formalized the geometric principles the Egyptians had perfected through practice. Figures like Anaximander and Ptolemy are often credited with developing advanced sundials, but their work stood on the shoulders of the Egyptian masters of mnemonics. The Romans, ever the practical engineers, adopted this technology with enthusiasm, placing obelisks they had looted from Egypt squarely in their public forums to serve as central sundials for their citizens. The sophisticated timekeeping devices that eventually enabled the age of exploration, with sailors navigating vast oceans by the sun and stars, can trace their lineage back to the first priest who looked at a long, dark shadow stretching across the sand and saw not an absence of light, but a precise measurement of the universe. Yet to truly understand the spiritual power of the obelisk, we must look beyond its physical form to the very essence of what it represented, the Benben stone. In the swirling chaos of the Egyptian creation myth, before the world began, there arose a single, primordial mound from the waters of nothingness. This was the Benben, the first dry land, the place where the creator god Atum stood to bring all of existence into being. The obelisk, with its towering pyramidal peak, was a direct architectural echo of that sacred mound. It wasn't just a representation. It was believed to be a permanent, physical anchor of that creative power, a conduit to the moment of Genesis itself. Every time the sun's rays struck its electrum cap, it was seen as a reenactment of that first dawn, a daily resurrection of the world from the darkness of night. This imbued the obelisk with an aura of eternal life and renewal, making it not just a monument to the gods, but a participant in the ongoing cycle of creation. This profound symbolism was made active and dynamic through the medium of its shadow. The ancient Egyptians perceived the sun's daily journey as a literal, perilous voyage. Each evening, the solar deity Ra would descend into the underworld, the Duat, to battle the forces of chaos and darkness, only to be reborn triumphantly at dawn. The obelisk's shadow was understood as the earthly echo of this cosmic struggle. As the shadow lengthened and swept across the temple plaza with the setting sun, it was not merely a sign of the day's end. It was the god's own passage into the underworld, made visible and tangible to the people. Priests and worshippers could literally stand in this sacred darkness, participating in the drama unfolding above and below. The shadow was a bridge, a direct and physical connection between the mortal realm and the divine, allowing humanity to witness and engage with the sun god's eternal cycle of death and rebirth. Rituals were meticulously choreographed around this moving bridge of darkness. The ground around an obelisk was not a blank slate. It was a sacred map inscribed with markers of immense spiritual significance. When the shadow's tip touched a specific carved symbol or altar at a precise moment, it was a signal for action. Priests would immediately begin chanting specific hymns or presenting offerings of food, incense, and precious oils at that exact spot. This wasn't a general act of worship, it was a targeted invocation. The shadow was believed to carry the essence and power of the solar deity down to earth. By placing an offering directly in its path at the ordained time, they were feeding the god, strengthening Ra for his nightly battle in the Duat, or thanking him for his victory at dawn. These rituals were a form of cosmic maintenance, a sacred duty performed by the community to ensure the sun would continue to rise and the ordered world would be preserved against the ever-lurking chaos. The technology of the obelisk itself was designed to maximize this spiritual connection. The pyramidion, the gleaming capstone, was far more than decorative. Capped in electrum, a dazzling alloy of gold and silver, it acted as a powerful reflector and concentrator. The Egyptians believed this brilliant surface did not just reflect light, it captured and focused the raw, life-giving energy of the sun itself. This concentrated solar force was then channeled down the sharp, tapered sides of the obelisk and projected onto the earth through its shadow. The area touched by this shadow was thus believed to be spiritually charged and purified. This is why major public ceremonies, oaths, and even legal judgments were often conducted within the obelisk's shadow. It was a space sanctified by divine energy, where truth could be revealed and order reinforced. The shadow cleansed and protected, making it the ideal setting for any activity requiring divine sanction and favor. This intricate fusion of function and belief transformed the entire concept of timekeeping from a mundane task into the highest form of spiritual participation. For the ancient Egyptians, to measure the hours was to align oneself with the rhythm of the gods. Each observation of the shadow's position was a prayer, each marking of its passage an act of devotion. There was no separation between the scientist recording the shadow's length and the priest chanting a hymn. Often they were the same person. By tracking time, they were not controlling it but rather synchronizing human activity with the divine will, ensuring that society moved in perfect harmony with the cosmos. This sacred dimension elevated the obelisk from a sophisticated tool to a living entity, a stone embodiment of faith that allowed every person, from the pharaoh to the farmer, to play a part in the daily miracle of creation simply by glancing up at the sky and acknowledging the silent, sweeping hand of the sun. The process of bringing an obelisk from a raw block of stone to a polished monument piercing the sky began in the quarries of Aswan, where the granite was not just cut, but coaxed from the living earth with a technique that bordered on alchemy. Teams of skilled workers would identify a flawless section of red granite, then use handheld balls of dolerite, a stone even harder than granite, to relentlessly pound a series of deep, narrow grooves along the intended fracture line. This was a monumental act of patience and precision, taking months of continuous, rhythmic pounding to create a channel deep enough for the next brilliant step. They would then take simple wooden wedges, place them into the grooves, and soak them with water. As the wood absorbed the water, it expanded with incredible, inexorable force, creating a clean, controlled fracture that separated the massive obelisk blank from the bedrock without shattering it. This method of using the elements stone, wood, and water in concert demonstrates an intuitive, profound understanding of material science, turning the very properties of nature into their most powerful tools. Freeing the obelisk was only the first challenge. Moving a stone that could weigh as much as 400 tons, the equivalent of 250 modern cars, required a logistics operation that would be impressive even with today's machinery. The journey from the quarry to the riverbank was the first perilous leg. Workers would construct a specially reinforced sledge from massive timbers and position the obelisk on top, using levers and rollers. Then the real effort began. Teams of laborers, sometimes numbering in the thousands, would pull on heavy ropes, dragging the sledge along a prepared causeway that had been lubricated with water or mud to reduce friction. This was a scene of coordinated chaos, with overseers chanting rhythms to keep the teams in sync, ensuring the colossal load moved steadily without lurching or, worse, tipping. The goal was the mighty Nile, where a custom-built barge, a floating fortress of wood, awaited. Loading the obelisk onto this vessel without capsizing it was a feat of balance and bravery, using the river's own buoyancy to assist. Once secured, the barge would be towed by a fleet of smaller boats, its journey downstream a state-sponsored spectacle, a slow-moving testament to the pharaoh's power visible to every village along the banks. The most heart-stopping moment in the entire endeavor was undoubtedly the erection. After a journey of hundreds of miles, the obelisk would arrive at its sacred destination, lying prone on its side. To stand it upright, engineers employed a breathtakingly simple yet terrifyingly risky technique, involving a massive earthen ramp built at a carefully calculated angle. The base of the obelisk was positioned at the ramp's pivot point, while the length of the stone stretched up the incline. Using a system of levers, counterweights, and the raw muscle power of hundreds of men pulling on ropes, crews would slowly, inch by agonizing inch, begin to raise the head of the obelisk. As it rose, workers would funnel sand into the ever-widening space beneath it, a clever trick that provided a constantly adjusting support and a measure of control. If something started to go wrong, they could simply let the sand pour out to arrest the movement. The tension during this operation must have been unbearable. A single snapped rope, a misplaced lever, or a miscalculation in the ramp's integrity could send the multi-hundred, 100-ton stone crashing down, destroying a decade of work and likely claiming countless lives in an instant. The final, triumphant moment when the obelisk settled into its vertical base, standing perfectly plumb, was not just a construction victory, it was a miracle. This staggering investment of manpower, time, and treasure projects that could tie up a significant portion of the state's labor force for years was never seen as merely a civil engineering project. Inscriptions and reliefs from the period make it clear that these endeavors were considered acts of piety, performed under the direct favor and protection of the gods. Pharaohs did not take credit for the engineering. They attributed the successful transport and erection of an obelisk to divine intervention, to the will of deities like Ammon or Ra who desired their monument to be raised. This spiritual framing transformed the back-breaking labor of thousands into a sacred duty, a collective act of worship that would bring blessings upon the entire kingdom. The obelisk was more than a tool. It was a physical manifestation of the covenant between the pharaoh, the people, and the gods. The vast resources poured into its creation were not an extravagance but a necessary investment in maintaining cosmic order, ensuring the sun would continue to rise, the Nile would flood, and the kingdom would prosper. The engineering prowess on display was, in their eyes, simply the human component of a divinely sanctioned collaboration. While the ancient Egyptians perfected the obelisk as a sacred scientific instrument, they were far from the only civilization to recognize the profound power of a monumental stone casting a precise shadow. The concept proved irresistible, traveling across continents and millennia, with each new culture adapting the principle to their own unique worldview and needs. Perhaps no civilization was more famously enamored with these monuments than the Romans, though their relationship was born more from conquest than creation. Following the annexation of Egypt, Roman emperors viewed obelisks as the ultimate trophies, tangible symbols of their empire's reach and their dominance over a culture they considered ancient and mystically powerful. Transporting these multi-hundred-ton stones across the Mediterranean was a logistical nightmare and a bold statement of imperial engineering prowess. But once in Rome, they were not merely put on display as inert spoils of war. The Romans, ever practical, repurposed them. In the Campus Martius, the great public field dedicated to Mars, the god of war, the Emperor Augustus installed a massive Egyptian obelisk to serve as the gnomon of a gigantic horizontal sundial. The shadow it cast swept across a pavement inlaid with bronze lines and Greek inscriptions, marking the hours, the seasons, and the lengths of the days for the citizens of Rome. This act was a brilliant piece of political theater. It demonstrated that Rome could not only conquer the exotic wisdom of Egypt but could also harness it, literally using a symbol of pharaonic power to regulate the daily life of its own capital. Far to the south, in the highlands of Axum in modern-day Ethiopia, a different tradition of obelisk building flourished entirely independent of Egypt. The Aksumite stelae, while sharing the monolithic and towering qualities of their Egyptian cousins, served a primary function as funerary markers for the elite, often placed above underground burial chambers. Yet, their precise orientation and imposing presence suggest they too played a role in tracking the heavens. These finely carved stones, some reaching over 100 feet tall, were positioned with clear astronomical intent. Their shadows moving across the sacred landscape would have provided a public and reliable method for marking significant times for ceremonies linked to agricultural cycles and commemorative rituals for the ancestors they marked. The alignment of these stellar fields indicates a careful observation of solar and stellar movements, showing that the desire to anchor human time to cosmic time through stone and shadow was a universal impulse emerging in cultures that had no direct contact with one another. Even earlier, in the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia, we see a parallel concept expressed through different architecture. The great ziggurats, massive stepped pyramids with temples at their summits, were not solid like obelisks but functioned in a remarkably similar way. Their towering, tiered structures cast long, complex shadows that shifted across the surrounding plazas. Priests of Sumer and Babylon, much like those in Egypt, were keen astronomers. They used these shifting shadow patterns to schedule the critical agricultural activities that their society depended on: when to plant the barley, when to harvest the dates, and when to prepare the irrigation channels for the seasonal rains. The ziggurate's shadow was a giant clock face on the ground, its movements dictating the rhythm of life in the city-state below. This demonstrates that the core principle, using a monumental structure to translate the sun's movement into a practical, earthly guide, was discovered independently by multiple advanced civilizations, proving its fundamental utility and power. Centuries after the fall of Rome, the obelisk experienced a spectacular revival during the Renaissance. European scholars, rediscovering the texts of antiquity, became fascinated with the wisdom of ancient Egypt, which they viewed as a source of pristine knowledge. Obelisks, both those standing ruined in Rome and others still half-buried, became symbols of this learned antiquity. Popes and princes embarked on ambitious projects to unearth, restore, and re-erect these monuments, not as sundials, but as potent symbols of papal authority and a connection to a glorious past. The most famous of these projects was under the direction of architect Domenico Fontana in 1586, who orchestrated the incredibly complex moving and raising of the Vatican obelisk in the center of St. Peter's Square. This was a feat that captured the imagination of all Europe, a statement that the Church was the heir to ancient empires and divine wisdom. While its timekeeping function was largely symbolic by this era, its placement created a new kind of sacred space, its shadow falling upon the heart of Christendom, a bridge between the ancient pagan world and the new Christian one. This journey of the obelisk from the banks of the Nile to the forums of Rome, the fields of Axum, and the piazzas of Renaissance Europe reveals a profound and universal human truth. Across vast distances and cultures, humanity has repeatedly sought to merge the monumental with the practical, the artistic with the scientific. The obelisk was never just a stone, it was an idea. It was the idea that we could reach for the heavens while keeping our feet firmly on the ground, that we could measure the divine and use that measurement to organize our daily lives. Whether as a trophy of empire, a marker for the dead, a catalyst for harvest, or a symbol of revived learning, the core principle remained: a towering form, a moving shadow, and a society looking up to understand its place in the grand, orderly cosmos. Think of the most bustling square in a modern city today, filled with people checking their watches and phones, all synchronized to the same precise clock. In the ancient world, the obelisk served that very same purpose, but its timekeeping was woven into the very fabric of public space and civic life. These towering monuments were rarely hidden away in secluded temple sanctuaries. Rather, they were strategically placed in the busiest, most accessible plazas and courtyards, transforming them into the heart of the city's daily pulse. Their shadows did not belong to the priests alone. They were a public utility, a shared resource that everyone from the highest official to the humblest merchant could read and understand. This was timekeeping stripped of exclusivity, a giant stone clock face laid out for the entire community to see, creating a collective rhythm that governed the metropolis from sunrise to sunset. This shared temporal reference created a framework of remarkable efficiency and order. The opening and closing of the city gates, a critical matter of security and commerce, was not left to the whim of a guard captain. Instead, it was tied to the obelisk's shadow, as the first light of dawn stretched the monument's shadow to a specific marker on the western edge of the plaza, the great gates would creak open, allowing farmers, traders, and travelers to enter. Conversely, as the last sliver of sunlight dipped below the horizon and the shadow dissolved into the general darkness of evening, the gates would be decisively barred, securing the city for the night. This system was impartial and predictable, eliminating confusion and ensuring the safety of all within the walls. In a similar vein, the scheduling of court sessions and legal proceedings was often announced by the shadow's position. A herald might declare that the judges would hear cases once the shadow touched a particular carved line, allowing citizens to organize their day and ensure they arrived on time. Even military drills and the changing of the guard were coordinated this way, with units moving in precise, synchronized formations based on the public clock, ensuring the state's protective forces operated like a single, well-oiled machine. The economic life of the city also thrived under this solar regulation. Market vendors operated on a schedule dictated by the heavens. The commencement of official trading hours was frequently signaled by the obelisk shadow falling upon a specific stone or inscription within the marketplace itself. This created a fair and level playing field. No merchant could gain an unfair advantage by opening early, as everyone waited for the same celestial cue. The announcement might be as simple as a market official calling out, "The shadow falls, the market is open." This auditory signal, backed by the visible proof in the square, would trigger a wave of activity as stalls were uncovered and goods were presented. For farmers in the surrounding countryside, the obelisk's shadow provided guidance for more than just market trips. Its length and direction at different times of year offered clues about the optimal moments for irrigation. A shorter shadow at noon indicated the intense, high sun of summer, suggesting a greater need for watering crops, while a longer shadow might signal the cooler temperatures where less water was required. This practical application connected the rural agricultural cycle directly to the urban civic clock. Perhaps one of the most fascinating social functions was the use of shadow markers to reinforce legal and moral codes. In some instances, the ground around an obelisk was not just marked with lines for hours, but also inscribed with short laws or proverbs. For example, a marker that the shadow reached at midday might be carved with a phrase like, "Do not bear false witness," or "Justice is the foundation of the land." As citizens gathered and saw the shadow touch these inscriptions, it served as a daily, silent reminder of the community's values and the laws that bound them together. It was a form of constant, passive education in civic virtue, linking the concept of right timing with right action. This practice wove the authority of the state and the gods directly into the passage of time itself, suggesting that to live in harmony with the sun was to live in accordance with truth and order. This democratization of time had a profound psychological impact, fostering a powerful sense of collective identity and shared experience. In a society without personal timepieces, the obelisk created a common reference point that everyone could access equally. The baker, the scribe, the soldier, and the slave all looked to the same shadow to structure their day. This created a synchronized rhythm for the entire population, a shared tempo that reduced social friction and built a strong sense of community. People felt connected to each other because they were all participating in the same daily cycle, all responding to the same cosmic cues. The obelisk, therefore, was far more than civic infrastructure. It was a social glue. It fostered a culture of punctuality and collective responsibility, uniting a diverse population under the harmonious and predictable rule of the sun, proving that a shared understanding of time is one of the most fundamental forces that can bind a society together. Without access to our modern calculators or trigonometric tables, The ancient Egyptian mathematicians possessed a remarkably sophisticated understanding of geometry that allowed them to predict the behavior of an obelisk's shadow with stunning accuracy. Their methods were not based on abstract equations as we know them today, but on practical, hands-on ratios and relationships that they encoded into reproducible geometric diagrams. At the heart of this system was a simple yet powerful right-angled triangle formed by three elements: the obelisk itself, the shadow it cast along the ground, and the imaginary diagonal line from the tip of the obelisk to the tip of the shadow. By mastering the ratios between these three sides, they could solve for any unknown variable. If they knew the height of the obelisk and the angle of the sun, they could accurately predict the length of the shadow that would stretch across the temple plaza at any given time of day or year. This predictive power was absolutely essential, transforming the obelisk from a simple observational tool into a precise instrument for planning future events. Evidence of this advanced calculation system has been found in temple archives and on surviving papyrus fragments, where priests maintained detailed tables of shadow length. These were not simple notes, they were intricate data sets that correlated specific dates on their calendar with expected solar angles and the corresponding shadow measurements. A priest could consult these tables weeks or even months in advance to know that on the day of the summer solstice, the noon shadow would be precisely so many cubits long, and that it would touch a specific marker on the ground at a precise moment in the afternoon. This allowed for the meticulous planning of complex religious festivals, the timing of a grand procession, the moment a high priest would recite a specific hymn, or the exact instant an offering was to be presented to a god. All of these critical moments could be scheduled down to the minute based on these pre-calculated shadow positions. This turned ritual into a precise science, ensuring that every sacred action was performed at the most astrologically potent and auspicious moment, perfectly aligned with the cosmos. A fascinating and uniquely Egyptian mathematical concept that was directly applied to this practice was the sect. While we primarily know the sect as the unit of measure used to define the slope of a pyramid's sides, its application was far broader. The sect expressed a ratio, specifically the horizontal distance a slope moves for every single cubit of vertical rise. This is fundamentally identical to the modern trigonometric concept of the cotangent of an angle. Egyptian mathematicians used this same principle to understand the sun's angle. They would consider the obelisk as the rise and its shadow as the run. By calculating the sect of the sun's rays, the relationship between the height of the obelisk and the length of its shadow, they could quantify the sun's altitude in a way that was consistent, reproducible, and easily communicated. This standardized unit allowed a priest in Thebes to convey a specific solar measurement to a colleague in Memphis using a common mathematical language, ensuring consistency in their astronomical records and ritual practices across the entire kingdom. This complex and vital knowledge was not reserved for a select few geniuses. It was systematically taught in the scribble schools attached to major temples. Young men training for administrative and religious roles spent years mastering mathematics, which they called the reckoning of things. They practiced on ostraka flakes of limestone or broken pottery, working through hundreds of problems that involved calculating areas, volumes, and, most importantly for our purposes, ratios and proportions. A typical problem might present a student with an obelisk of a given height and ask him to calculate the length of its shadow when the sun is at a certain altitude, expressed as a sect. Solving this required a firm grasp of geometric principles and the ability to manipulate fractional units. This rigorous education ensured a continuous supply of mathematically literate priests and officials who could maintain the astronomical tables, oversee construction projects, and most importantly, accurately read the divine messages written in sunlight and shadow, keeping the machinery of the state and religion running in perfect harmony with the universe. The sophistication of this entire system is what makes it so breathtaking. These precise calculations and the deep understanding of solar geometry they represent were being used and recorded centuries, and in some cases over a millennium, before the Greek mathematicians like Thales and Pythagoras, who are often credited with founding trigonometry, were even born. The Egyptians may not have given their ratios the names sine or cosine, but they had operationalized the concepts behind them with incredible effectiveness. Their work was not theoretical, it was profoundly practical, born from the daily necessity of predicting the Nile's flood, aligning a monument to true north, and knowing the exact moment a shadow would fall upon an altar. This reveals a civilization that had developed a robust and entirely indigenous form of mathematical science, one that allowed them to encode the laws of the universe into a workable system of geometry and use it to build a society that truly believed it was living in step with the gods themselves. Imagine the tension in the air at the Karnak temple complex as the sun climbed toward its zenith on a specific, highly anticipated day. All eyes were fixed not on the sky, but on the ground, watching the sharp, dark finger of the obelisk shadow creep inexorably closer to a single, ornately carved altar known only to the high priesthood. This was the moment of the shadow of Amen, a celestial trigger that set in motion one of ancient Egypt's most magnificent spectacles. The very instant the shadow's tip made contact with the sacred stone, a powerful signal was given. A deep, resonant blast from a ceremonial horn would echo across the courtyard, and the great doors of the inner sanctuary would swing open. From within, a procession would emerge, led by priests carrying the heavy, gilded bark that housed the statue of the god Ammon. Chanting and the rhythmic shaking of sistrums would fill the air as the parade began its journey along the precise processional route, believed to channel the god's power and presence throughout the land. This was not merely a scheduled event, it was a direct response to a divine signal written in sunlight and stone, a moment where architecture, astronomy, and faith converged to create a living ritual. The solstices represented another pinnacle of this sacred choreography, moments when the sun's relationship to the earth was at its most extreme. On these days, the entire layout of a temple complex became a stage for a profound astronomical drama. The main axis of many temples was meticulously aligned so that on the summer solstice, the rising sun would send a beam of light shooting directly through the entrance, down the long hypostyle hall, and into the darkest, most sacred chamber, the inner sanctum that housed the cult statue of the deity. But it was the obelisk's role that added a crucial layer of symbolism. As the sun climbed, the obelisk's shadow would retreat and shift in a very specific way, perfectly aligning with the edges of the doorway or touching designated markers on the threshold at the exact moment the sunlight illuminated the inner god. This dual alignment was interpreted as the solar deity not just entering the temple, but using his own shadow, cast by his stone embodiment, to unlock and purify the doorway, granting him access to commune with the other gods within. This was the ultimate blessing, a moment of intense spiritual energy that reaffirmed the cosmic order and the pharaoh's role as the god's representative on earth. On a more earthly level, the obelisk's shadow was the farmer's almanac, dictating the rhythm of survival for the entire civilization. The success of the harvest was a matter of life and death, and timing was everything. Priests maintained precise records of where the afternoon shadow fell at different times of the year. When that lengthening shadow finally reached a specific marker in the temple plaza, a stone perhaps carved with the image of Renenutet, the cobra goddess of the harvest, or Osiris, the god of fertility and resurrection, it was the official signal to begin the harvest. This was not a suggestion, it was a directive backed by divine authority. The moment the shadow touched that marker, messengers would be dispatched to the surrounding villages, and a wave of activity would sweep across the countryside. Farmers would take up their sickles, knowing the grain was at its peak perfection, and that the timing was cosmically approved to ensure maximum yield and the gods' continued favor for the next planting season. The obelisk, therefore, moved seamlessly from the realm of the gods to the field of the farmer, its shadow ensuring that the entire kingdom ate. These events were far from somber affairs. They were vibrant, multisensory celebrations that engaged the entire community. The air would thicken with the sweet, pungent smoke of Kai-Fi incense, a sacred blend of 16 ingredients including honey, wine, and juniper, believed to please the gods and induce a state of heightened awareness. The rhythmic clatter of menats and the jingle of sistrums provided a hypnotic soundtrack to the chanting of hymns. Following the official ceremonies, the entire community would often participate in great feasts. The state would distribute bread, beer, and meat from the temple stores, turning a cosmological observation into a shared social experience. This fusion of jubilant celebration with serious scientific observation blurred the line between party and prayer, making the worship of the cosmos a central and joyful part of public life. The incredible precision required for these rituals meant that any deviation was cause for deep concern and seen as a potentially catastrophic omen. If a cloud passed over the sun at the critical moment and delayed the shadow's arrival, or if a priest miscalculated and the procession began too early, it was not viewed as a simple mistake. It was interpreted as a rupture in the cosmic order, a sign that the gods were displeased or that the forces of chaos were gaining strength. Such an event required immediate and decisive action to restore mat or divine harmony. The ceremony would be halted and elaborate purification rites would begin. Priests would burn additional incense, recite spells of protection, and make emergency offerings to appease the angered deity. The entire community might be called upon to participate in prayers or fasts until the celestial signs could be rechecked and the ritual rescheduled for a more auspicious time. In this way, the obelisk's shadow was a barometer of the kingdom's spiritual health, its reliable movement a sign of stability, and its unexpected behavior a warning that demanded immediate rectification. While the great obelisks of Egypt may seem like relics of a distant past, their intellectual legacy is woven into the very fabric of our modern world, starting with the devices we use to measure time for centuries. The fundamental principle they established using a fixed object to cast a measurable shadow was the seed from which all later timekeeping grew. European sundial makers of the medieval and Renaissance periods didn't start from scratch. They refined the Egyptian concept, creating more portable and precise versions with curved dials and angled gnomons that could account for the sun's changing path throughout the year. These elegant garden and pocket sundials were direct descendants of the monolithic obelisk, miniaturizing its function for personal use. This relentless pursuit of accuracy in tracking the sun's movement eventually created the necessary conditions for the next great leap, the mechanical clock. The very concept of dividing the day into 12 equal hours, a system we still use today, was first made visible and practical by the sweeping shadow of an obelisk. The inventors of the first weight-driven clocks in 14th century Europe were essentially trying to replicate the sun's reliable motion with gears and springs, creating an artificial shadow that could function regardless of weather or time of day. In this way, the obelisk's shadow is the great-grandparent of every clock tower and wristwatch, the original idea that set humanity on the path to mechanized time. This fascination with the obelisk's function was not lost on the great scientific minds who laid the foundations of modern astronomy. during the Renaissance, as these Egyptian monuments were being rediscovered and re-erected in Rome, scholars began to look at them with new eyes, not just as trophies but as data points. Galileo Galilei, in his meticulous studies of solar motion, would have understood the obelisk as a large-scale scientific instrument. His work required a profound understanding of the sun's apparent movement and the Earth's rotation, principles that the Egyptian priests had already operationalized millennia before him. While Galileo used telescopes and pendulums, the underlying challenge was the same: to quantify and predict celestial motion with greater and greater precision. The obelisk stood as a silent stone testament to the long human history of this quest, a reminder that the questions he was asking were ancient ones. The data gathered from such shadows over centuries contributed to the pool of knowledge that allowed astronomers like Johannes Kepler to formulate his laws of planetary motion, transforming our understanding of the entire solar system. Even today, in the heart of the modern world, these ancient principles are still at work, serving as powerful tools for public education. The Washington Monument in the United States Capitol is a prime example, a towering obelisk in every sense of the word, though built millennia after its Egyptian inspirations. On any sunny day, you can see visitors using its long, sharp shadow as a giant sundial, a living demonstration of the same geometry that priests once used in Karnak. Educational groups often use the monument to teach basic principles of astronomy, measuring the shadow's length at different times to calculate the sun's altitude, or to mark the solstices and equinoxes as it touches specific points on the surrounding grounds. It's a tangible bridge across thousands of years, connecting schoolchildren with the same hands-on science that once guided an empire. This demonstrates that the obelisk's value is not locked in the past. It remains a functional, accessible, and deeply engaging way to make abstract cosmic concepts immediately visible and understandable. Perhaps the most surprising and profound link lies in our most advanced modern technology, the Global Positioning System, or GPS. Every time your smartphone pinpoints your location on a map, it is performing a breathtaking feat of timekeeping. The system works by receiving signals from multiple satellites, each containing an incredibly precise atomic clock. Your device calculates the tiny differences in how long those signals take to arrive, a process that requires accuracy within billionths of a second. A timing error of just 1/1,000,000th of a second would throw off your location by over 300 meters. This entire system of hyper-precise synchronization is the ultimate evolution of the same problem the Egyptian priests were solving: how to measure a fundamental phenomenon, in their case the sun's movement, in ours the speed of light, to navigate and place ourselves in the world. While an obelisk shadow could never provide the nanosecond accuracy of an atomic clock, the conceptual debt is clear. Both systems are built on the foundational idea that measuring time with precision is the key to understanding our place in the universe, from a farmer knowing when to plant along the Nile to a driver knowing which exit to take on the freeway. This enduring legacy reveals a beautiful truth about the human journey. Our quest to quantify time, which now resides in the chilled, pristine environment of atomic clocks and satellite networks, did not begin in a sterile laboratory. It began in the hot sand of a temple courtyard, with poets and priests who looked at a stretching shadow and saw not just the end of a day, but a divine message, a cosmic rhythm, and a practical guide for life. They were the original scientist-philosophers who seamlessly blended meticulous observation with spiritual wonder. The obelisk stands as their permanent memorial, a stone needle that forever stitches together the practical and the profound, reminding us that our greatest technological achievements often have their roots not in cold calculation, but in a profound desire to connect with the cosmos and find our rhythm within its grand, orderly dance. Despite the incredible amount we've managed to decipher about these ancient stone giants, they remain shrouded in tantalizing mysteries that continue to challenge modern archaeologists and engineers. One of the most perplexing questions is how the ancient builders achieved such astonishingly precise alignments without the tools we take for granted today. They had no magnetic compasses to find true north, yet the cardinal orientation of their obelisks is often accurate to within a fraction of a degree. Some researchers propose they used the stars, perhaps sighting on the circumpolar constellation of the Plough or the star Thuban, which was the pole star in ancient times. Others suggest a simpler, yet brilliantly effective, method involving a vertical rod or a length of rope used to track the sun's shadow over the course of a day, marking its arc to find a perfect east-west line. The true method remains one of history's great silent secrets, a technique lost to time that speaks to a level of practical genius we can only admire from a distance. Equally elusive are the complete mathematical methods behind their shadow tables, while we've found fragments of records and a few papyri that hint at their calculations. The full scope of their predictive algorithms hasn't survived. These weren't just simple notes, they were complex data sets, the product of centuries of meticulous observation, allowing priests to know exactly where an obelisk's shadow would fall on any given day of the year. How did they account for the slight variations in the Earth's orbit or the subtle changes in the sun's path over centuries? Did they have a system for updating their tables, and if so, how was this knowledge transferred and verified across generations? The fragmentary nature of the surviving records means we're often piecing together their intellectual achievements from scattered clues, like trying to understand a symphony by hearing only a few isolated notes. Adding to the intrigue are the peculiar wear patterns found on and around some obelisks. While much of the erosion can be attributed to thousands of years of wind, sand, and human contact, certain patterns don't fit this simple explanation. Some bases show unusual polished grooves or specific points that are worn smoother than the surrounding stone. This has led to speculation about additional, undocumented uses. Could these obelisks have served as massive astronomical sighting tools for planets or specific stars beyond the Sun and Sirius? Perhaps priests used them in conjunction with reflective surfaces or pools of water to capture celestial light for after-dark ceremonies or to track the moon's phases. These wear marks are the physical fingerprints of lost rituals, silent clues that we haven't yet fully learned to read. This void of certain knowledge has, perhaps inevitably, given rise to more speculative theories. Some propose that the obelisks, particularly those capped with conductive metals like electrum, functioned as giant energy conductors, harnessing atmospheric electricity or telluric currents from the Earth. Others suggest their specific geometry and placement were designed to create resonance chambers, amplifying sound for ceremonial purposes, or even influencing human consciousness during rituals. While these ideas capture the imagination, it's crucial to note that they currently reside in the realm of theory, with little to no hard archaeological evidence to support them. They often say more about our modern desire to find lost advanced technologies than they do about actual ancient practices. Yet, they persist because the obelisks themselves are so awe-inspiring that they seem to invite grand explanations. Ultimately, these unanswered questions are not a failure of science, but rather an invitation, a call to continue exploring. The field of experimental archaeology is now taking up this challenge, attempting to reverse engineer the construction and function of obelisks. Teams are trying to move and erect multi-ton stones using only ancient methods to see if it's even possible to achieve the precision we witness in the historical record. Archaeoastronomers are using sophisticated software to model the ancient Egyptian sky, comparing their digital reconstructions with the alignments of obelisks to see if they can crack the code of their celestial targeting. Each season of excavation might uncover a new ostracon with a mathematical calculation or a previously overlooked ground marking that sheds light on these mysteries. The obelisks stand as permanent puzzles, reminding us that for all our advanced technology, the ingenious minds of the ancient world still have secrets to teach us, and their silent stones still have stories left to tell. For generations, the true purpose of obelisk alignments was largely a matter of educated guesswork, pieced together from ancient texts and scattered inscriptions. Today, a powerful fusion of traditional archaeology and cutting-edge technology is allowing us to move beyond speculation and into the realm of verifiable fact. This exciting field, known as archaeoastronomy, is acting like a scientific time machine, enabling researchers to peer back through the millennia and witness the celestial connections these ancient engineers designed with such breathtaking precision. By applying modern instruments and digital simulations to these ancient stones, we are finally able to decode the messages they were meant to convey, confirming that their placement was never arbitrary, but was the result of profound astronomical intent. One of the most crucial tools in this modern detective work is the humble theodolite, a precision optical instrument used for measuring angles between visible points. Archaeoastronomers take meticulous sightings from an obelisk's base to its peak and then to distant horizon features, calculating the exact azimuth or compass bearing of its alignment. This data reveals if it was positioned to frame the summer solstice sunrise or the winter solstice sunset. But the real revolution has come from software like Stellarium, a planetarium program that can recreate the night sky from any location on Earth at any point in history. Researchers can input the exact coordinates of an obelisk and then roll back the virtual clock 4,000 years, watching as the simulated sky rotates above it. They can see if the apex perfectly framed the star Sirius as it first reappeared before dawn, heralding the Nile flood, or if the Pleiades cluster dipped behind its tip on a specific holy night. This digital validation removes all doubt, proving that these alignments are not lucky coincidences, but are mathematically precise celestial targets. Beyond the sky, technology is also revealing secrets hidden in the very earth around these monuments. Ground-penetrating radar and LiDAR, which uses laser pulses to map surface topography, have scanned the plazas surrounding obelisks, uncovering what centuries of sand and foot traffic have obscured. These scans have detected faint, ghostly outlines of paved pathways and carefully placed stone markers that are invisible to the naked eye. When these markings are mapped onto a digital model, a stunning pattern emerges. They form a perfect radial design fanning out from the obelisk's base, corresponding exactly to the path the shadow would have taken on the solstices and equinoxes. We are literally rediscovering the ancient clock face upon which the shadow told time, confirming the descriptions left in hieroglyphic texts. It's as if we are wiping away the dust of ages from a giant celestial dial, revealing the meticulous planning that went into its creation. Even the stones themselves are now able to tell their stories through advanced material analysis. Spectral imaging and microscopic analysis of the pavement stones at specific shadow points show distinct patterns of wear and chemical residue that differ from the surrounding areas. The stone might be noticeably smoother from generations of feet standing in that exact spot, awaiting a ritual. More tellingly, spectrographic analysis can detect trace residues of organic materials, specific oils, resins from incense like frankincense and myrrh, or minute traces of spilled ceremonial liquids like wine or milk that soaked into the stone over centuries of repeated offerings. This provides tangible, physical proof of the rituals that inscriptions only describe. We can now identify not just where a ceremony happened, but what was offered to the gods at the precise moment the shadow touched that point, adding a rich, sensory dimension to our understanding of these ancient practices. This wealth of new data is fundamentally reshaping our perception of these monuments. We no longer see obelisks as isolated triumphs of engineering, but as central components within a vast, integrated astronomical landscape. Detailed surveys show that the main axis of an obelisk at Karnak might be deliberately aligned with a specific peak on the distant horizon that itself marked a solar event, or that its position creates a direct sightline to the entrance of a nearby temple dedicated to a solar deity. The entire sacred complex, the obelisks, the temples, the processional avenues, and even the natural horizon was designed as a single, cohesive unit, a machine for interacting with the cosmos. This reveals a level of urban planning and celestial understanding that is truly staggering, showing a civilization that designed its entire worldview around the orderly motion of the heavens. This interdisciplinary approach, blending astronomy, archaeology, and geology, is unlocking new layers of meaning that were unimaginable just a few decades ago. It allows us to appreciate the obelisk not as a static relic, but as the dynamic heart of a living system. We can now understand that a priest wasn't just looking at a shadow on the ground. He was participating in a grand, cosmic ceremony where architecture, astronomy, and belief merged into one. Each alignment was a thread in a larger tapestry, connecting the earthly realm with the divine through a language of stone and sunlight. By employing these modern tools, we are not diminishing the mystery of the obelisks. We are deepening our awe for the ancient minds that could conceive of such a perfect, enduring dialogue with the universe. Imagine the profound sense of security that came from living in a world where the cosmos itself seemed to affirm your place within it. This was the daily reality for those living in the shadow of an obelisk. The predictable, unwavering sweep of its darkness across the marked plaza provided more than just the time of day. It offered a powerful psychological anchor in a world filled with uncertainty. In an era where famine, disease, and conflict were constant threats, the obelisk's rhythm created a framework of stability. Everyone knew that when the shadow touched the morning marker, the gates would open. When it shrunk to its shortest point, it was time for the midday meal and rest. This unbreakable routine reduced the background anxiety of daily life, creating a shared tempo that everyone moved to. This wasn't just about efficiency, it was a deep, subconscious comfort, a knowing that no matter what challenges the day brought, the sun would rise, the shadow would move, and the community would carry on in sync with the universe itself. This shared rhythm forged an invisible bond between people, turning a disparate population into a cohesive unit that literally moved together through time. This synchronization went beyond mere scheduling. It cultivated a powerful collective identity. When a farmer in his field, a potter at her wheel, and a scribe in the administrative hall all paused at the same moment to observe the shadow's arrival at a significant point, they were participating in a shared experience that transcended social class and occupation. They were all, in that moment, equal witnesses to a cosmic event. This collective pause for a solstice celebration or a dawn offering created a powerful sense of we, a feeling of belonging to something far greater than oneself or one's immediate family. The rituals dictated by the shadow were communal projects preparing for a festival, gathering for an offering, or even just the shared understanding of the market schedule. These repeated, coordinated actions are what sociologists call collective effervescence, a state of heightened emotional energy and social connection that arises from group rituals. The obelisk, therefore, was not just a stone timekeeper but the central pillar of social cohesion, generating a sense of unity and mutual responsibility. that was essential for the survival and flourishing of a complex ancient society. The awe inspired during major celestial events, like a solstice alignment, delivered a potent psychological cocktail of wonder, fear, and reverence that deeply strengthened faith in the established order. Picture the gathered crowd as the winter solstice shadow stretched longer and longer until it finally touched the feet of a statue of Ra. A hush would fall over the multitude, followed by a roar of collective relief and jubilation. This was the moment the sun god began his victorious return, promising the rebirth of the land. This experience of awe, the feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends your current understanding, is a powerful emotional state that psychologists have shown can make people feel more connected to others and more invested in their community. It also solidifies respect for authority. The priests and the pharaoh, who were seen as the intermediaries who could predict and channel this awesome power, gained immense legitimacy. Their leadership was validated not by military might alone, but by the apparent approval of the cosmos, making their rule feel divinely ordained and unquestionably right. This psychological impact was a cornerstone of social stability for millennia. Modern neuroscience helps us understand why these ancient practices felt so meaningful and why their echoes still resonate with us today. Functional MRI studies have shown that participating in rituals, especially repetitive, familiar ones performed in a group, activates specific neural pathways in the brain. These include the default mode network, which is associated with our sense of self and our search for meaning, and regions linked to reward and emotional processing. Essentially, these rituals provide a neurological reward, a sense of calm, belonging, and purpose. The predictable pattern of the shadow's movement, combined with the rhythmic chanting, singing, and synchronized actions of the accompanying ceremonies, likely induced mild, trance-like states of focus and collective empathy. This brain activity explains the enduring appeal of ritual across human history. It is not a primitive superstition but a fundamental human need to create order, find meaning, and connect with our community, all needs that were met every single day under the guidance of the obelisk's silent, sweeping hand. This deep-seated human yearning is why, even today, thousands of people from all walks of life gather at ancient sites like Stonehenge in England or Chichen Itza in Mexico for solstices and equinoxes. They may not believe in the sun god Ra, but they are drawn by the same powerful psychological forces that moved the ancient Egyptians. They seek that same feeling of awe, that same connection to a grand cosmic cycle, and that same sense of belonging to a temporary community of fellow witnesses. When the light hits a pyramid just so or a shadow falls in a perfect line, you can feel a palpable shift in the crowd, a shared intake of breath, a collective moment of wonder. This modern phenomenon proves that the obelisk's true power was never in the stone itself, but in its function as a catalyst for a profound human experience. It provided a fixed point in a changing world, a way to physically see our connection to the universe, and a daily reminder that we are part of a larger, beautiful, and orderly whole, a need that remains as vital today as it was 4,000 years ago. From the very civilization that raised them, the obelisk was never just a stone pillar. It was a potent symbol captured in art for all to understand its divine power. In surviving reliefs and paintings from ancient Egyptian tombs and temples, obelisks are frequently depicted not as inert objects, but as active, almost living entities. They are often shown emitting rays of light, much like the sun god Ra himself, with these rays ending in tiny hands, bestowing the Ankh, the symbol of life, upon the ruling pharaoh and his family. In other scenes, we see the obelisk's distinct shadow cast over a crowd of worshippers, visually connecting the people to the monument's celestial function. This artistic language was a direct communication of ideology. The obelisk was a channel of solar energy and a bestower of divine favor, making the pharaoh's connection to the gods and his role as the guarantor of Egypt's prosperity permanently visible on the temple walls. Art was the medium that translated complex theology and science into a powerful, instantly recognizable icon for every citizen. This fascination with the obelisk as a marvel of human achievement quickly spread beyond Egypt's borders, captured most vividly by the Greek historian Herodotus in the 5th century BC. Traveling through Egypt, Herodotus was utterly astounded by what he saw, and his written accounts introduced the obelisk to the European imagination. He described them not in mystical terms, but as breathtaking feats of engineering and precision, meticulously detailing the Herculean efforts behind their quarrying, transportation, and erection. For Herodotus and his Greek audience, the obelisk became the ultimate symbol of a mysterious, ancient, and immensely sophisticated civilization. His narratives framed the obelisk as a monument to human ingenuity, a testament to what a highly organized society could accomplish. This perspective was incredibly influential, setting the stage for how later Western cultures would view Egypt not just as a land of strange gods and magic, but as a cradle of profound scientific and architectural knowledge. The obelisk, through his eyes, became a bridge between the ancient and classical worlds. Centuries later, during the Renaissance, this classical interest in Egypt was reborn with a new layer of meaning. As European scholars rediscovered the texts of antiquity and began to explore the world, the obelisk was reimagined once more. In the paintings of this era, obelisks began to appear in backgrounds, often slightly ruined and overgrown, placed in imagined biblical or classical landscapes. Artists like Pinturicchio included them in frescoes depicting the life of Moses, while others placed them in Roman forums. This wasn't about historical accuracy, it was about symbolism. The obelisk in Renaissance art became a visual shorthand for ancient wisdom, lost knowledge, and the venerable passage of time. It represented a connection to a grand, forgotten past that the thinkers and artists of the Renaissance sought to emulate and revive. By incorporating these Egyptian forms into their work, they were aligning their own cultural rebirth with the perceived purity and grandeur of antiquity, making the obelisk a timeless emblem of intellectual and artistic aspiration. The Romantic poets of the 18th and 19th centuries took this symbolic weight and infused it with a deep, brooding emotional resonance. For them, the obelisk was the perfect metaphor for endurance and sublime truth standing against the ravages of time. Percy Bysshe Shelley's famous sonnet, Ozymandias, is the ultimate expression of this. Though the statue lies in ruins, the surrounding, lone and level sands stretch far away, evoking the same desolate landscape that often featured fallen obelisks. The obelisk, whether standing proud or toppled, represented the sheer scale of geological time, making human empires and their squabbles seem fleeting and insignificant. Yet there was a paradox in their view. The obelisk was also a symbol of the artist's own quest for immortality. Though civilizations fall, the monument and the art it inspired endured. The Romantic obsession with the obelisk was a meditation on mortality, a recognition of nature's overwhelming power, and a hope that a great work of art or thought could, like the obelisk itself, achieve a form of eternity. This rich symbolic legacy ensures the obelisk remains a powerful visual staple in modern media, particularly in stories that seek to evoke a sense of ancient mystery and epic drama. Big screen adaptations of Cleopatra's life invariably feature obelisks framing lavish scenes, their sharp silhouettes against the desert sky instantly signaling the audience that they are in a world of pharaohs, gods, and monumental power. They provide the perfect backdrop for rituals of power, romance, and betrayal, Beyond historical epics, obelisks appear in fantasy and adventure genres, from the alien monolith in 2001, A Space Odyssey, a direct descendant of the obelisk form, to the dramatic opening of The Mummy 1999, where they loom over a bustling ancient city. In these contexts, the obelisk retains its ancient connotations of otherworldly power and esoteric knowledge, but it is also used for pure spectacle, a quick visual cue that establishes a setting of awe-inspiring antiquity and grandeur. This continuous thread of representation, from ancient reliefs to modern cinema, reveals something fundamental about our enduring fascination. The obelisk is more than an architectural relic. It is a blank slate upon which every era projects its own values, fears, and aspirations. The Egyptians saw it as a divine conduit, the Greeks as an engineering marvel, the Renaissance as a symbol of lost wisdom, the Romantics as a metaphor for truth, and modern Hollywood as a signifier of epic adventure. What unites all these interpretations is a profound respect for the obelisk as the ultimate symbol of human ingenuity, a perfect fusion of audacious ambition, precise science, and spiritual yearning. It represents that rare moment where humanity dared to reach for the heavens, not just in myth but in stone, and in doing so, created an icon that forever reminds us of our capacity to blend the earthly and the sublime. This enduring fascination with stone and shadow is far from a relic of the past. It pulses with vibrant life in the spiritual practices of our modern world. Across the globe, a growing number of people are looking to these ancient monuments not just with historical curiosity, but as active portals to a deeper, more connected way of being. Neo-pagan communities and New Age seekers have embraced the principles behind obelisk shadows, weaving them into the fabric of their solstice and equinox celebrations. For them, these astronomical events are not merely dates on a calendar but powerful energetic gateways, moments when the veil between the earthly and the cosmic is believed to be at its thinnest. They see the obelisk's precise alignment with the sun as a key to unlocking these energies, using the shifting path of its shadow as a focal point for meditation, chanting, and rituals designed to harness the unique qualities of each season. A summer solstice gathering might focus on drawing down the sun's peak power for manifestation and abundance, guided by the obelisk's shortest shadow, while a winter solstice ceremony would honor the returning light and introspection as the shadow stretches to its longest point. This isn't about replicating ancient Egyptian religion with perfect accuracy. It's about adopting a timeless, archetypal language of stone and sky to frame their own spiritual explorations and connect to the cyclical rhythms of the natural world in an increasingly digital and disconnected age. This revival is perhaps most visibly embodied by modern Druid orders and other earth-based spiritual groups who have chosen obelisks as the stage for their most significant ceremonies. In the heart of London, against a backdrop of bustling traffic and modern skyscrapers, groups regularly gather at the base of Cleopatra's Needle on the Thames embankment. While this obelisk was originally erected by Thutmose III in Heliopolis and later moved by the Victorians, its function as a celestial marker is being rediscovered. On the mornings of the solstices and equinoxes, you can find robed figures carefully watching the first rays of sun strike the ancient granite, noting where the first slivers of shadow fall. They may conduct rituals that honor the sun as a source of life, recite poetry inspired by ancient texts, or simply stand in silent reverence, using the obelisk's imposing presence as a catalyst for their connection to something ancient and eternal. These gatherings are powerful acts of re-enchantment, deliberately layering modern spiritual practice onto a physical artifact of deep history. They are not claiming an unbroken lineage but are instead engaging in what scholars call invented tradition, creating meaningful new ceremonies that draw inspiration from the past to address contemporary spiritual needs, all centered around the silent, reliable witness of the obelisk. Beyond organized ceremony, the simple, mindful practice of shadow tracking has found a home in the wellness and mindfulness movements. Advocates argue that in our modern lives, dominated by artificial light and digital screens, we have become profoundly disconnected from the natural rhythms that governed human life for millennia. This disconnection, they suggest, is a source of chronic stress, anxiety, and a feeling of being ungrounded. The act of intentionally observing a shadow, whether from an obelisk, a tree, or even a simple stake in your backyard, becomes a form of active meditation. It forces you to be present in the moment, to notice the subtle, imperceptible movement of the sun, and to physically witness the passage of time in a way a ticking clock never could. This practice of solar mindfulness encourages individuals to structure their day around these natural cues, perhaps taking a morning break when a shadow points east or beginning a period of reflection as it lengthens in the evening. It's a way of re-anchoring the human nervous system to the slow, dependable pace of the planet, using the same basic principle the ancients used to build their civilizations, but applying it now to the challenge of finding inner peace and mental clarity. It is crucial to recognize that for most of these contemporary applications, the approach is deeply symbolic and experiential rather than scientifically precise. A modern druid is not taking trigonometric measurements of the shadow's length to calculate the sun's altitude. They are feeling its symbolic weight. A wellness practitioner using shadow tracking is less concerned with the exact minute of solar noon and more focused on the meditative state that the observation induces. The power lies in the metaphor and the personal meaning derived from the act, not in the kind of rigorous data collection practiced by ancient astronomer priests. This distinction doesn't diminish the value of these modern practices. Instead, it highlights a different goal. Where the ancients sought to predict and control their environment through exact celestial observation, many modern seekers are using the same tools to explore their inner landscape and cultivate a sense of wonder and connection. This fascinating revival reveals a profound and enduring human desire to find bridges to ancestral wisdom, especially in times of rapid technological change. The obelisk, in all its silent, solid majesty, represents a tangible link to a time when humanity's relationship with the cosmos was direct, intimate, and woven into the very fabric of daily existence. In an age of satellite navigation and atomic clocks, the act of gathering to watch a shadow move across stone is a conscious choice to participate in a slower, more elemental form of knowledge. It represents a yearning to integrate the intuitive and the sacred back into a world that often prioritizes only the rational and the measurable. This isn't a rejection of modern science, but rather a complementary seeking, an attempt to reclaim a sense of the mystical and the meaningful by engaging with the same cosmic dance that has inspired awe in every generation. The obelisk's shadow, therefore, continues to tell time, but its message has evolved. It no longer just marks the hours, but reminds us of our timeless need to look up, to wonder, and to find our rhythm within the vast, beautiful, and orderly patterns of the universe. The best part about unlocking the secrets of ancient timekeeping is that you don't need a 400-ton block of granite to get started. You can embark on your own journey of celestial discovery with nothing more than a simple wooden dowel, a broom handle, or even a sturdy stick pushed firmly into a patch of level ground. Find a sunny spot, a backyard, a balcony, or a local park will work perfectly, and just like the ancient Egyptian priests, you have now established your personal gnomon, the central element of your very own sundial. The first step is perhaps the most profound. Simply observe. Watch throughout a single day as that slender shadow describes a perfect arc, sweeping from west in the morning to its shortest length around local noon, and then stretching back out toward the east as the afternoon wears on. This daily dance is the most fundamental rhythm of our planet, and by watching it, you are participating in one of humanity's oldest scientific traditions. To move from casual observation to precise measurement, you can begin to mark the shadow's position at different intervals. Every hour on the hour, take a small stone, a piece of chalk, or a popsicle stick and place it at the very tip of the shadow cast by your stick. Over the course of a sunny day, you will create a semicircle of markers around the base. What you are effectively creating is a horizontal sundial, a direct and personal descendant of the great obelisk clocks of Karnak. The next day, you can watch as the shadow of your gnomon touches each marker, telling you the time with a quiet, solar-powered accuracy. Notice how the spacing between your hourly marks isn't uniform. The shadow moves faster around midday and slower in the early morning and late afternoon. This is because a sundial measures apparent solar time based on the sun's actual position in the sky, which is different from the mean solar time our modern clocks use. This simple experiment reveals the complex reality behind our simple notion of an hour, a complexity the ancient Egyptians understood intimately. The real magic, however, unfolds over weeks and months as you begin to notice the dramatic seasonal changes in your shadow's behavior. If you continue your markings for several days in a row, you'll see that the shadow's path is not static. In the height of summer, your noon shadow will be at its absolute shortest, a tiny dark pool huddled close to the base of your stick. As the weeks progress toward winter, you will witness that same noon shadow gradually stretch longer and longer each day. This is the Earth's axial tilt in action, a concept the Egyptians deduced through these very observations. To truly honor their methods, you can take your experiment a step further by aligning your setup with the cardinal directions. Using a modern compass or even the old trick of placing a stick in the ground and marking the tip of its shadow at intervals to find a true east-west line, orient your marking surface so that north is accurately established. This simple act of alignment will make your sundial far more precise and connect you to the immense effort ancient surveyors undertook to ensure their obelisks were perfectly positioned. For the modern seeker who wants to verify their findings or dive even deeper, technology offers a wonderful assist. Smartphone apps like Sun Surveyor or Photographer's Ephemeris allow you to see precise astronomical data for your exact location. You can pull up the app to see the exact times for sunrise, solar noon, and sunset on any given day, and then compare that data to what your stick sundial is telling you. You can use the app to know exactly when the solstices and equinoxes will occur, and then make a point to go outside and document the shadow's length and direction at solar noon on those pivotal days. This isn't cheating, it's a powerful way to cross-reference your observations and gain a deeper appreciation for the accuracy the ancients achieved without any digital tools. It bridges the gap between their world and ours, allowing you to see the same sky through a dual lens of simple observation and modern verification. The ultimate reward for your patience comes when you plan to observe the equinoxes. On these 2 days of the year, around March 20th and September 22nd, something special happens. Because the sun rises due east and sets due west, the shadow path from your gnomon will fall on a nearly perfect straight line from west to east throughout the day. It is a moment of beautiful symmetry in an often asymmetrical world. Making these observations on a solstice or equinox is perhaps the closest a modern person can get to feeling the awe that ancient priests and sky watchers must have felt. You are witnessing a celestial event that has dictated human ritual, agriculture, and wonder for thousands of years. There's a profound connection that forms when you stand there, not just reading about these concepts in a book or watching them in a video, but seeing the evidence of our planet's journey around the star we call home, traced silently and faithfully in a shadow on the ground. This hands-on approach transforms abstract astronomy into a tangible, personal experience, proving that the urge to understand our place in the cosmos is a timeless human impulse that can still be satisfied with a simple stick, a sunny day, and a curious mind. Despite their well-documented history, obelisks have become magnets for some of the most outlandish and persistent modern myths, often overshadowing their true genius. One of the most popular and sensational claims is that these ancient monuments were used as communication devices for extraterrestrial beings or as power generators for lost advanced technologies. This idea typically points to the obelisk's precise geometry and the reflective properties of its electrum cap, suggesting it could channel some form of unknown energy. However, this theory completely ignores the vast and detailed cultural record the Egyptians left behind. We have their own words carved into the very stone of these monuments and written on papyri, describing exactly why they were built: to honor the sun god, to serve as a giant sundial, and to act as a conduit for the pharaoh's divine power. There is not a single hieroglyph, not one line of text that mentions alien contact or supernatural energy harvesting. These functions were deeply practical and spiritual, designed to work within a worldview where the gods were present in the natural world, not from beyond the stars. Attributing their construction to aliens doesn't just disregard the evidence, it robs the ancient Egyptians of the credit for their own breathtaking ingenuity and skill. Another common misconception is that obelisks were used as prophetic devices to predict future catastrophes or global events. This myth often gets tangled up with broader conspiracy theories about secret knowledge hidden by ancient civilizations. The reality is far more grounded and, in many ways, more impressive. Obelisks were tools for predicting annual, cyclical events, not random disasters. They could forecast the summer solstice or the heliacal rising of Sirius with incredible accuracy because these are predictable, repeating patterns in our solar system. Their entire purpose was to announce harmony and order, the regular, dependable rhythm of the universe known as Mat. They were instruments designed to prevent chaos by ensuring rituals were performed on time and harvests were collected at their peak, not to warn of impending doom. The idea that they were oracles of catastrophe projects a modern, apocalyptic anxiety onto a culture that was fundamentally focused on maintaining balance and stability through careful observation of a predictable cosmos. A more subtle but equally important myth to dispel is the assumption that every ancient obelisk is inherently Egyptian. While the form was undoubtedly perfected along the Nile, the concept of a towering, shadow-casting monolith proved irresistible to other advanced cultures who adapted it for their own unique purposes. We've already explored how the Romans repurposed Egyptian obelisks as grand sundials and trophies, but they also inspired original construction elsewhere. The Aksumite kingdom in modern-day Ethiopia created their own stunning obelisks known as stelae, which served as elaborate grave markers for royalty. While their primary function was funerary, their precise orientation suggests they also played a role in marking celestial events for ceremonial calendars. Similarly, in ancient Mesopotamia, while they built ziggurats instead of obelisks, the principle was identical, using the shadow of a massive man-made structure to track the sun's movement for both religious and agricultural scheduling. This independent innovation across the globe shows that the desire to reach for the sky and measure the sun was a universal human impulse, not an idea exclusive to one culture. Many of these modern myths persist because they offer a more thrilling, mysterious narrative than the one painstakingly assembled by archaeologists and historians. Conspiracy theories often thrive in the gaps of public knowledge, and the average person isn't familiar with the decades of meticulous scholarship that have decoded these monuments. It's far easier to suggest a secret energy source than it is to understand the complex mathematics of the seeked ratio or the logistics of loading a 400-ton stone onto a barge. These theories also tend to ignore the overwhelming body of evidence that supports the practical and spiritual explanation. This evidence includes the astronomical alignments verified by modern software, the wear patterns on surrounding pavements from centuries of ritual foot traffic, the chemical residues of offerings found at specific shadow points, and the countless inscriptions that explicitly state the obelisk's purpose. Dismissing this evidence in favor of a sensational story does a great disservice to the ancient minds who designed them. Ultimately, when we strip away the layers of modern fiction, what remains is a truth that is arguably more awe-inspiring than any myth. These were not magical objects, they were masterpieces of human creativity, scientific inquiry, and unwavering faith. The real magic lies in the fact that humans, using only stone tools, rudimentary mathematics, and immense collective will, were able to quarry, transport, and erect these perfect stone needles. They then used them to track the complex dance of celestial bodies with precision that would not be surpassed for millennia. They harmonized an entire civilization with the cosmos, turning the abstract passage of time into a visible, shared experience that governed everything from farming to worship. By letting go of the alien theories and doomsday prophecies, we can finally appreciate obelisks for what they truly represent. One of humanity's most ambitious and successful endeavors to understand the universe and find our sacred place within it, using nothing but sunlight, shadow, and sheer intellectual brilliance. But the story of these ancient monuments is far from finished. We stand on the brink of a new golden age of discovery, one powered not by ropes and sledges, but by lasers, algorithms, and international collaboration. The future of obelisk studies is being reshaped by a suite of technologies that would seem like pure magic to the ancient priests who first raised them. Imagine being able to step back in time, to stand in the great temple complex of Karnak as it looked 3,500 years ago, with its paint fresh and its obelisks gleaming under the Egyptian sun. This is now possible through the power of virtual reality and hyper-accurate three-dimensional scanning. Archaeologists are using LiDAR scanners, which fire millions of laser pulses to create a perfect digital twin of an obelisk and its entire surrounding landscape. This isn't just a static model, it's a dynamic simulation. Researchers can input the precise astronomical data for any date in history, and then simply watch as the virtual shadow sweeps across the digitally recreated temple plaza. This allows them to test long-held theories about ritual timing with pinpoint accuracy. Was there really enough time for a procession to move from point A to point B before the shadow touched a specific altar? Did the shadow align with a secondary marker that has been lost to erosion? These questions, once the subject of scholarly debate, can now be answered definitively, transforming our understanding of how these ceremonies unfolded in real time and space, down to the minute. Beyond the virtual world, microscopic science is revealing secrets hidden in the very stones themselves. For centuries, the stone pavements around obelisks have shown mysterious dark stains and subtle residues. Until recently, we could only guess at what these might be. Now, advanced DNA sequencing and chemical residue analysis are allowing scientists to identify the organic materials left behind by countless rituals. Using delicate tools, they can collect microscopic samples from the exact points where inscriptions indicate offerings were made. Mass spectrometry can then break down these samples to identify their molecular signature. Was it frankincense or myrrh resin that was burned at the winter solstice? Was the dark stain at the base of an obelisk from spilled wine, honey, or the blood of a sacrificial animal? This biochemical archaeology moves us beyond guesswork, providing a tangible, sensory inventory of the ceremonies. It allows us to move from knowing that an offering occurred to understanding what that offering consisted of, revealing the specific materials ancient people believed were worthy of their gods and deepening our comprehension of their spiritual economy and the precise recipes of their devotion. The scale of discovery is also expanding dramatically, moving from the intimate to the immense thanks to the view from space. High-resolution satellite imagery and aerial photogrammetry are revealing that the connections between obelisks and the landscape are far more extensive than anyone previously imagined. We've long known that individual obelisks were aligned to celestial events, but new analysis suggests they were also part of much larger, integrated geographical networks. A newly discovered obelisk base in a remote area might, when viewed from above, be found to align perfectly with a peak on the distant horizon that itself marks the summer solstice sunrise. Another might create a direct sightline to a temple doorway 50 miles away. These aren't random alignments. They form deliberate, long-distance lines of sight, turning the entire country into a vast astronomical instrument. This suggests a level of centralized planning and geodetic knowledge that is truly staggering, implying that teams of surveyors could precisely coordinate the placement of monuments across hundreds of miles to create a cohesive, country-wide sacred landscape designed to mirror the heavens on Earth. This new era of research is fundamentally collaborative, breaking down the old silos between academic disciplines. The most exciting projects now involve teams where an Egyptologist, a software engineer, an astrophysicist, and a materials scientist all work side by side. For example, engineers are using finite element analysis software typically used to test the structural integrity of modern bridges, to model the stresses involved in moving and erecting a 400-ton obelisk. By inputting the known properties of granite, wood, and rope, they can test different hypotheses about ancient techniques in a risk-free digital environment. How many men would be needed to pull a sledge of a given weight on a lubricated path? What angle of ramp would be required to safely raise the obelisk without it fracturing? These digital experiments allow historians to move beyond speculation and identify the most plausible and efficient methods, separating viable techniques from those that would have been physically impossible. This collaboration is turning engineering into a form of experimental archaeology, providing concrete answers to questions that have puzzled historians for centuries. The convergence of all these technologies, virtual simulation, molecular analysis, satellite surveying, and digital engineering, promises to solve the most persistent mysteries surrounding these monuments. The exact method for calculating their perfect cardinal alignment, the lost formulas for their shadow tables, the purpose of strange wear patterns on their surfaces, these are no longer dead ends but active puzzles on the verge of being solved. Each new discovery does more than just answer an old question. It elevates our appreciation for the ancient mind. It reveals the obelisk not as an isolated artifact of a superstitious culture, but as the centerpiece of a sophisticated scientific tradition, a cornerstone of ancient knowledge that seamlessly wove together meticulous observation, complex mathematics, audacious engineering, and profound spirituality. The ongoing study of these stone giants is a powerful reminder that the past is not a static record but a living field of inquiry. and with every technological advance, we gain a sharper, clearer window into the brilliance of those who first dared to measure the heavens with nothing but stone and shadow. From the sun-baked sands of ancient Egypt to the bustling city squares of the modern world, the obelisk stands as one of humanity's most enduring and multifaceted achievements. It is a rare artifact that somehow manages to be all things at once, a staggering feat of engineering, a precise scientific instrument, a profound spiritual symbol, and the very heartbeat of social organization for entire civilizations. These stone needles represent a breathtaking fusion of human ambition, where raw power met delicate precision, and where the pragmatic need to tell time seamlessly intertwined with the sacred desire to touch the divine. Their long, sweeping shadows did far more than merely mark the hours. They orchestrated the symphony of daily life, from the prayers of the high priest to the labor of the farmer, unifying communities under a single cosmic rhythm and creating a tangible bridge between the earthly realm and the vast, mysterious cosmos above. The journey to uncover the full depth of their purpose is far from over. With every technological advance, from LiDAR scans that map hidden ground markings to residue analysis that identifies ancient offerings, we peel back another layer of their mystery. Each new discovery does more than just add to our historical knowledge. It offers a profound source of inspiration for our own fast-paced, digitally saturated lives. The obelisk teaches a timeless lesson about the value of synchronizing our lives with the natural world's rhythms, of finding awe in the predictable dance of the heavens, and of building communities around shared, meaningful experiences. It challenges us to look up from our screens and reconnect with the slow, majestic cycles of the planet we call home. So the next time your path crosses one of these silent stone sentinels, whether it's in Rome, London, New York, or a history book, take a moment to truly see it. Don't just see a relic or a trophy of empire. See the quarry workers patiently pounding stone in a swan, the engineers directing thousands of laborers along the Nile, the priests meticulously recording shadow lengths on flakes of limestone, and the crowds gathering in awe as a solstice shadow touched an altar. Remember the sophisticated science, the deep faith, and the communal spirit that its silent dance with the sun once powered. It is a monument to what we can achieve when we reach for the sky, not in defiance of nature, but in perfect, harmonious partnership with it. If this journey into the world of ancient timekeeping and celestial shadows sparked your curiosity, you can help this channel grow by hitting that like button and sharing this video with anyone who loves a good historical mystery. Your support makes it possible to dive even deeper into the past. To make sure you don't miss our next exploration into the world's greatest enigmas, tap the subscribe button and ring that notification bell. It's the best way to stay connected to our community of history lovers. Now, we'd love to turn the spotlight over to you. Have you ever stood in the shadow of an obelisk, maybe in Rome, Istanbul, or even New York City? Have you ever tried tracking shadows in your own backyard to see time through ancient eyes? Share your personal stories and questions down in the comments below. Your experiences are a constant source of inspiration and often become the catalyst for the topics we cover next. Thank you for watching, and remember, the greatest stories are still written in the light of the sun and the shadows it casts. Until our next adventure, keep looking.